Hello and welcome to, of course, another movie review on HSG. Once again, as with my last review, don't worry, this isn't some kind of Exorcist reenactment. I just happen to be doing this review at night time. Because why not? I was bored, so I sat down to do a couple of movie reviews and got these done. Now, this movie actually worried me when I first sat down and started watching it, because the name of the movie and the concept when I read it on Netflix kind of twinged at me. I thought, that sounds a little bit familiar. Then when I started to watch the movie, I felt a little bit more concerned, but thankfully as the movie played out, my worries were completely alleviated, and for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, which will be most people, the reason why this movie concerned me is because, as some of you know, I'm an author, mostly horror, and I actually put out my most recent free novel here on the channel. It's called A Room Called Sin. It's about 15 minutes long. It's a free audiobook read by me. And it's about a guy who wakes up in a white room and is tormented. So you can kind of understand why I was a little bit apprehensive going into this movie, because of course this movie came out in 2018. I only wrote A Room Called Sin here in 2020. So if anything, it was going to be me being a little bit too close to the film, even though of course I hadn't seen it, so that would have been unintentional. Thankfully though, totally different. This is much more the sci-fi and thriller end of things, whereas mine is more like a supernatural horror end of things, with maybe some thriller in there as well. So what's the idea of this film? Well, as I kind of alluded to, it's about a character, on this occasion a woman instead of a guy in my story, waking up in this white room, kind of an interrogation chamber, if you will, where there's no real windows or doors or anything, and basically she begins to be tormented for information. And then the movie has, without spoiling anything too specific, anything that you don't learn relatively early on anyway, the movie plays around with time. And this is something which a number of movies that I've talked about do, where you'll jump back and forth through the current situation and maybe what led up to it, or maybe stuff that can kind of tie into the current situation. A recent example on the channel would be The Monster, from 2016, I believe it was, where that movie takes place in the car with the mother and daughter, but then you kind of jump back and forth through different moments in time between them. This movie does a similar thing. So you're in the moment, then it jumps to 5 days before, plays out a little bit, then forward in time, back and forth and back and forth. It's an interesting way of telling the story, and it does help to break it up a bit. Plus, I like the fact that this movie has clever enough writing to keep you guessing. And that's not really something that happens that much these days, let's be honest. There are a lot of movies that were very cleverly written for a long time, and then people almost became fine with having formulaic cinema make a lot of money. And of course, if that starts to make a lot of money, then studios are going to stick with that, and more of it's going to be made. So I'm glad that movies like this are still out there, even though I don't hear much chatter about this one, and that's a shame. Now, incidentally, it is a British movie. British actors, it's filmed in the UK, I believe a British director. The director also wrote the movie. I believe it was produced by his brother as well, so it was very much a family affair. And I don't recall the actor's name, but there is an actor in this movie who was also in The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, which was pretty cool to see him pop up. You don't see him in that many movies, not that many good ones at least. He was in a weird horror movie about like a sentient car trying to kill people in a car park. Sounds interesting, but trust me, don't watch it. It's horrendous. But yeah, it's a very interesting flick. And of course, I can't spoil any more story-wise until we get to the spoiler portion. So what I'll say for the non-spoiler roundup is I would definitely recommend checking this one out. If you enjoyed my book, A Room Called Sin, definitely check this one out, because it's similar in concept but totally different in terms of story. Likewise, if you have watched this movie, click the link down below and check out my book. Like I said, it's only 15 minutes long, it's free, and you might enjoy it. So if you're that kind of person where you like I do, single location, kind of locked in thrillers, with very few people, maybe even one person in the case of my novel, then you'll enjoy this movie. I like the fact that it's a smaller British film as well. The vast majority of thrillers seem to be from the States these days, so it's cool to see one from my own country for a change. And yeah, I mean, it's a positive review. I didn't have any major downsides, in fact, about the movie. You could probably find something to pick away at. The only thing I could possibly think of is maybe a couple of lines of dialogue or moments of acting weren't quite up to par. But again, it didn't really matter too much. It certainly didn't disrupt the flow of the film, and it was still more than enjoyable enough for me to like it and recommend it. So to get into the spoiler talk, what can we discuss? Well, of course, if you haven't seen the film, you need to leave now, go and check it out, maybe come back and then tell me what you think. But of course, the character who I referred to, I don't remember the actor's name, I am horrendous with names, but the actor who played the Magi, I believe he was in The Mummy, who was a side character, of course, in this one obviously plays the General, who is initially outside of the room, then when we go back in time, he's inside the room, and of course is also a twin. He was cool to see back. He's not in enough movies, and it's cool to see him pop up. I certainly didn't expect him in this one, and I thought it was cool. I like how the movie, as I already said in the non-spoiler portion, goes back and forth through time. I thought that the main actress, the Dr. Chrysler, was a very interesting character. I thought she actually played the role very well, to be honest, because I hadn't seen her in anything before. I'm sure she's been in other things, but not that I've seen. And she was great. I thought she was great. She was believable. She was darker, of course, as the story went on. I really liked how they ended it as well with the poison. Because, of course, something had to happen with the poison when it was set up so early on in the movie. And I will say, with my writer's brain working toward this movie, especially once I knew that it wasn't like my story and I didn't need to worry anymore, I actually did notice myself, as many of us do, trying to figure out little things that were going to happen. As it turns out, my biggest prediction for the movie was kind of right and wrong at the same time, because as soon as you see the new woman, the younger one who comes into work with them, you know that she's going to be important to the plot. And since you already know that the General gets out of the box, well, if anyone's going to let him out, it's going to be her. So you already pretty much know that that's going to happen. It's just a matter of how. The how is where I was wrong. Because what I thought is, I wondered if she actually might be a part of his army already, or maybe even a relative of his, and was there specifically to infiltrate and to get him out. To me, that was the fairly obvious route to go down, and I expected the movie to do that. And of course it didn't. Like I said, the end result was still the same because she did let him out, but I liked the fact that it wasn't quite that predictable. So overall, I liked it. I liked the way the movie ended. I liked how kind of the woman who started off as this ultra, vulnerable, seemingly innocent person ended up showing her true colours more and more throughout the film, essentially becoming like a psycho, as many mad doctors are often shown as being, and ultimately ended the movie with at least the implication that she's probably still going to get the upper hand in the end, at least if they don't kill her first. Because, of course, with that poison, the precedent was set that it takes a few days to work. So, yes, she could kill, the guards in the room, potentially the General even, over a course of days, but once they're done with her, they may kill her anyway. So, I like that that's fairly ambiguous. Yes, she is a mastermind, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's going to win at the end of the day. So, I kind of like that. It felt like there were no real winners. I like also that it clearly had a small budget, very, very small, passionate team of people, you could tell for sure. And I liked how the inference of this British Civil War was mentioned so many times and expounded on so many times through the film without actually needing to really show much of it. And the vibe of this movie, and I'd love to know if you guys agree with this or not, the vibe actually kind of reminded me of like a 28 Days Later or a 28 Weeks Later. And when we first saw the woman who, of course, was not acid attacked, but who'd been subject to acid and was then overdosed, when you first see her, she looks like a zombie. So I thought that's where the movie was going, and I think that was deliberate. I think that was what you were supposed to think. But obviously it didn't end up going that way. To be honest, some people might have thought that was too much of a cliche to have it as another zombie movie. I would have been fine with that, to be honest. In fact, it would have been kind of cool to maybe have some kind of tie-in to like a World War Z or a 28 Days Later. But of course, that gets into rights issues and making sure you're not contradicting the other ones. And of course, this would have. So that's just me, again, kind of wanting a bit of crossover. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. As I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, so tell me what you thought of the movie. And as I said, if you did enjoy this flick, you should definitely check out my free book here on the channel, the link for which is right below this video. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.